Hi everyone, it's QuickyBaby and welcome back to World of Tanks, and today we've got the pleasure of watching Crazy Cure playing in their Ho-Re 3, and Wargaming looks like they need a cure for the Ho-Re 3 as it's been deemed to be too strong inside the game right now and it is being nerfed in the next update, which will probably arrive in a week or two for Wargaming's anniversary, I expect. So how are Wargaming nerfing the Ho-Re 3 and why is it necessary? And trust me, you're going to see in this game one of the very good reasons as why this tank is having its statistics adjusted. Well, firstly, the accuracy on this vehicle is going to be nerfed from 0.34 to 0.36. Not dramatic, but still significant. And we can see how much players like Crazy Cure value accuracy, deciding to use a bond aiming device on this vehicle instead of using something like vents. So the difference there would be 4.5% accuracy on the vents up to 9% accuracy. So Crazy Cure values accuracy over rate of fire on this vehicle. They value it over all of the other aspects, view range and so on and so forth. And you're going to see why with some of the crazy shots they're going to be hitting in this game. Unfortunately for Ho-Re drivers, next patch, you're going to be losing pretty much that kind of 2%, 3% accuracy on this vehicle with the change that will be applied. Also, Wargaming are changing the reverse speed of this tank down from 18 to 15. And so that means that using a turbo on this tank is going to be pretty much mandatory if you want to go backwards at any kind of rate. And we see that Crazy Cure is using a level 3 experimental turbo on this vehicle that will be improving their reverse speed by, I believe it's 4 kilometers an hour. So that's a significant nerf. 3 kilometers an hour is the equivalent of losing a regular turbo in reverse speed on this tank. In addition to that, Wargaming are also nerfing the engine health, would you believe it, by 15, but that's only from 360 down to 345. But the other significant nerf to the Ho-Re 3 will be the view range. It's going to go down from 400 base down to 380 base. No real need to panic there if you are a premium consumable user like Crazy Cure, but if you don't use a premium consumable on the Ho-Re 3, it might be time to start to have a second build on this tank where you might even consider to use coated optics, as the view range will get quite poor. But then again, you know, tank destroyers, their third field mod improves view range at the expense of your camo rating after firing. So, yeah, not the biggest of threats to this vehicle. I guess if you still wanted to maintain a decent view range on this tank with a build like Crazy Cure has, you could probably go halfway and say drop the aiming device. Of course, you're taking the accuracy hit. And use vents, which would improve your view range by 4.5%. You'd still have roughly the same view range that you have now. But again, it depends on the map. All you really need to know is that Wargaming are nerfing the Ho-Re 3, and while you can make changes to your vehicle that will make some aspects worse, you will inevitably feel the pinch. Now, funnily enough, Wargaming aren't adjusting the real aspects that I think makes this tank feel special, and that is the 300 millimeters of structure armor that this vehicle gets. Now, that 300 millimeters of armor, it can be really fun, and it can be really awful as well, because 300, and it's completely flat. It's completely flat, which means that AP is going to completely normalize any kind of gun depression the vehicle has. APCR will normalize up to 2, and the heat rounds, well, against this flat surface, they don't suffer nearly as much as you would do against angled armor. And so most vehicles, for their premium rounds, have 300 plus at tier 9 and tier 10, unless you're playing something like a Kranvang, which has 300 exactly. And that means that as long as you load gold against a Ho-Re 3's structure, you can go through the cheeks very reliably. What really suffers is the tier 8 tanks and tier 9 and tier 10s who don't fire gold at the Ho-Re's cheeks, because then it's just going to be able to tank them. And it's crazy to have this kind of vehicle with 7 degrees of gun depression that also has this crazy structure and has such a devastating 149 millimeter caliber gun. On top of this, Wargaming are also not nerfing one of the most scary aspects of the vehicle, and I think that this is probably the aspect that they should have adjusted with the Ho-Re 3, 360 millimeters of gold pen. And we can see that Crazy Cure knows just how good these gold rounds are because he's moved them from their 2 key to their 1 key. So if you're thinking, oh look, Crazy Cure, not loading that much gold in this game, we'll have to see with the credit balance at the end of it. But honestly, the Ho-Re 3 is one of those kind of tanks where if you're not spamming gold, are you even doing it right? Wow, clutch shot there without having to zoom in. Crazy Cure has the eyes of a hawk there, putting a lovely shell into the side of the Buitskavitsa. A very different kind of vehicle to the Hurry 3. And now they're going to get another one in here. Oh, beautiful timing. Lovely stuff. The premium consumable and the Bond Vents, sorry, not Bond Vents, Bond Rammer, really paying off there. And now Crazy Cure is going to come around the corner against the can opener who's on full health, go hull down on this Contradictious wreck and slap the side of that British tank. And you know your game is going well when you haven't lost a single hit point and you're up to 4,600 damage. Oh. Caster's Curse, as the always pesky Tier 8 Czechoslovakian heavy tank, the Skoda T56, puts not one, but 2 rounds into the Ho-Re, and they were regular rounds as well. What is this? This won't do. Arguably the best Tier 10 tank destroyer, at least for now, having to sacrifice so many hit points against a Tier 8 heavy. This is outrageous, right, boys and girls? Losing nearly half of their hit points there. And unfortunately, with the can opener getting a shot in as well, now Crazy Cure is down to 700 HP. But luckily, setting the can opener on fire, taking the 700 alpha damage that this vehicle has up a notch, and finishing off that British heavy. And oh dear, the Skoda's come back for more. Crazy Cure, luckily the gun absorbs the first shell. Unfortunately, however, that one's not going to absorb, and having just used their large repair kit, we see that Crazy Cure's engine is now damaged. However, by using the Armorer ability, which is mandatory pretty much on every single vehicle, their engine penalty is reduced, and they're still going to be able to at least limp around. So now Crazy Cure is unfortunately a one-shot for the entirety of the enemy team, down to 302 hit points. But man, 7,500 damage, and still there's 10,000 hit points left on the enemy team. Just how monstrous is this game going to be? So, the Ho-Re 3. Do I think that it needs a nerf? I guess just a little one. But it's interesting for me that Wargaming aren't really adjusting the aspects of the tank that I personally would have. I would have adjusted the rate of fire, and I would have adjusted the gold pen, personally, for me. And it would have still been this heavy-ish tank that had a very good gun. But the way that it stands right now is it's a very flexible heavy tank that has an incredibly good gun and just gold pen that can just make its opponents look stupid. Another aspect of Crazy Cure's build that I wanted to talk about is you see that they're actually using a snapshot directive. Now, a lot of people don't consider that tank destroyers, non-turreted tank destroyers, do benefit from a snapshot directive. Snapshot directive is, if you buy them in bulk, is 9,000 credits a game. But it doubles the effect of snapshot. Now, if you combine that with a premium consumable and something like vents, snapshot will actually be doing 10% rotation dispersion buff rather than the 7.5 that the tooltip would be suggesting. Crazy Q will be getting slightly less as they're not using vents on this vehicle. However, what the snapshot directive will do is it will double that effect. So 7.5 base will go up to 15, or you could get up to about 10 with a maximum crew skill boost, and that will go up to 20% reduced dispersion. And when you consider that the gun traverse on this vehicle is 10 degrees to the left and 10 degrees to the right, it's a fairly flexible gun within that regard, that whenever Crazy Cure is turning the gun to the left and the right, snapshot does impact the vehicle. And with this build, there'll be roughly about 17 to 20% reduced dispersion on that gun traverse, which is why Crazy Cure has been able to snapshot moving targets oh so well. So definitely a mistake that a lot of people in the World of Tanks community make, that if your vehicle has a nice wide gun arc, for example such as on a Tortoise, if it has bad turret traverse dispersion, it is still worth investing snapshot. A tank that is revolutionized by snapshot, a directive, is a Gorilla, for example. Although the Gorilla, it definitely has more of a turreted tank, right, than you would be on these kind of fixed emplacement guns or fixed turreted tanks, with the ability to still traverse the gun to the left and to the right significantly. Of course, it's not going to work on something like a Stridsvagn 103B. It would be the most wasted skill of all time. I can already hear people nervously checking their Stridsvagn 103B skills to see if they are using snapshot on that vehicle. Definitely still worth using something like Smooth Ride on that vehicle, however, when you are going backwards and forwards. But remember, Smooth Ride also doesn't affect the traverse dispersion of the vehicle. That's going to be a different metric altogether. All of these metrics are things that you can find on the awesome Tanks GG website when you're deciding what to take on your vehicles. All right, so Crazy Cure's team is down double hit points, pretty much even on tanks. And we can see a big old German behemoth of a vehicle, the Jagdpanzer E100. And it doesn't really matter if you're on 300 hit points or like 1,000 hit points when it comes down to the Jagdpanzer E100, right? So Crazy Cure is telling the Gonkovica to fall back. However, manages to see the Gonkovica get deleted to the garage. And when you thought that they only had double your hit points, now they've got triple your hit points and the same number of tanks. So Crazy Cure spots the Jaegeru, and you're going to see just what 360mm of A-pen is capable of here. And, well, it doesn't really matter if it hits the upper plate. It doesn't really matter if it hits the lower plate in that scenario. Although I do think that it hit the lower plate. This thing just balances. What a lot of people don't consider is that 360mm of AP pen is probably going to be better than the 375 of APCR that you'd be used to on the T110E3 and T110E4 as an example. And it will be comparable, if not better, than the 395 heat in certain scenarios. And that is when you're shooting at targets that are angled by more than 2 degrees for the APCR and more than 0 degrees for the heat. Because remember, the normalization changes the penetration required massively. Now, not in that example against the WT Panzer IV, as they just sit there and take it. But this is another reason why the Ho-Ri 3 is massive, and what Wargaming have not adjusted is the camo rating, as far as I'm aware. With the penultimate field mod on this tank, you get an extra 5% base camo, which means that your moving camo on this tank is kind of as good as the more sneaky medium tanks. And that means that the Ho-Ri can just use those bushes, not get spotted, and be able to rip apart the WT in quick time. And now with the Jaegeru, let the chips fall where they may, as Crazy Cure delivers the antidote to the back of that Jagdpanzer E100 for an 825 damage roll. And now Crazy Cure is up to 12,000 damage. And that blessed moment holding back the attack on the enemy team. Just how much damage has Crazy Cure done on 300 hit points? Too much damage, I'd say. Probably about like 4,000, 5,000 damage being a one-shot right now. But Crazy Cure has more work cut out for them. And now the enemy's hit point advantage has severely diminished. But Crazy Cure now sees the M40, M43 on the enemy team. Can they use that aiming device to snipe over? Oh, close, but just not quite. As the shell whiffs and the pesky American self-propelled gun lives to fight another day. And when you're on 300 hit points with a tank that only has 50mm of side armor, yeah, you don't really want to get caught out. And there we go, the M40-43 shutting down the ISU 1222. At least they're going to be on reload for the next 30 seconds or so, which might give time for the Blesk and the G-Saw to advance. So this game, still neck and neck. Crazy Cure's team has a tank advantage, but that Let Stridsfordon 120 could be anywhere in this scenario, and how are they going to manage to dig them out? The Let was last spotted on about 3/4 of their hit points, so that means that Crazy Cure's still going to have to hit them twice. Crazy Cure asks for help, hoping that the Blesk, hoping that the G-Saw are going to try and find the Let, and it looks like Crazy Cure has decided that they just don't have time to be able to wait. But oh no! Sixth Sense goes off, that's intimidating. Where is the Let Stridsfordon going to be? Are they going to be up in the bushes? Are they going any bushes? It could be any of them. But with only 1 minute left on the game and the possibility of having one of the greatest Ho-Ri 3 games of all time, Crazy Cure is going to push on, live up to their name, and try and find if they can catch a win out of this. Luckily, the artillery on artillery action removes the RNG from this game, and the G-Saw pings that the Let Stridsfordon is up in this position. So, the Let spotted. Will Crazy Cure be able to clutch shot over the ridge line against the Let? There we go! Right up into the top point, which gets an overmatch. And that allows the Blesk to shut down the Swedish TD from the side. Meaning that Crazy Cure doesn't pick up the top gun for their 13,000 damage. Ladies and gents, you got to see exactly why the Ho-Ri is a monster of a tank. Now, Will Wargaming's nerfs destroy the vehicle? Well, they're definitely going to remove the accuracy. They're going to make it so that unless you use a premium consumable and possibly vents, you're not going to have the best of view range anymore. So a build like this will be harder to be able to pull off. And they're removing the reverse speed of the tank. But these are all quite small changes that don't really adjust the aspects that I think make the Ho-Ri the Ho-Ri. And that is very good damage per minute for such a flexible tank destroyer, incredible gold pen of 360, which I think should have probably been changed to 350 or maybe even 345 on this vehicle. And so, yeah, Wargaming making these quality of life adjustments to a vehicle that is still going to be an absolute banger of a tank in the right scenario. And I'd just like to highlight that while Wargaming are adjusting the Ho-Ri 3, funnily enough, a vehicle that they recently buffed, the Foch B, not only does it have the better win ratio difference, it also has the better raw, close to having the better raw win ratio. So that's a tank that they recently buffed, the WZ-113G as well, a tank that they recently buffed, and it's just going to be a case of Wargaming maybe thinking, oh look, the Ho-Ri 3, it's getting too popular, but don't worry, our Foch doesn't matter if that thing's outrageous inside the game. It's really interesting for me, Wargaming's buffing and nerfing procedure recently. You know, they introduce a new game, it's too good. New game. Oh, that would be interesting if Wargaming actually introduced a new game that was too good, right? They introduce a new tank. No, wait for everybody to get it. Wait for it to become popular. Nerf it. And then buff vehicles that were fairly okay before to a point where now it looks like they might need a nerf, like the Foch B. And maybe they will when it gets popular. We'll just have to wait and see. So, Crazy Cure, congratulations to you on this ridiculous round. This was 1,578 base experience. 13,000 damage nets them one of the biggest, if not the biggest high caliber ever in the Ho-Ri 3. And in addition to destroying 5 tanks, they also got a Confederate medal for damaging 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 vehicles that were additionally destroyed by their allies, meaning that they damaged 12 out of 15 of the enemy tanks. And again, the only thing that you don't like is seeing 134,000 credits resupply, and also 30,000 resupply on the premium consumable and the directive. And Crazy Cure, if you love to use those directives and you have enough credits, I'm gonna save you, mate. You can purchase them in bulk. You can get 10% off anytime. It's not when there's a special sale on, so you can get your snapshot directives for 9,000 credits instead of 10,000 if you buy them en masse. But Crazy Cure, who cares about losing 50,000 credits when you have the account record of account records, right? 13,000 damage is epic, there's no doubt. And thank you so much for showing us why Wargaming are going to be nerfing this vehicle next patch. Now, whether they've adjusted the right statistics, that remains to be seen. The Ho-Ri is still going to be mincing your frontal armor. It's still going to be aiming at your turrets and laughing at you. It's still going to be going through your upper hull. But at least it's going to be a little bit more annoying for the player to play while they're doing that. Anyway, ladies and gents, boys and girls, that was it for today. Really hope you enjoyed this one. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you hated it, give it a thumbs down. And thank you so much to Crazy Cure for uploading this epic game on the QuickyBaby.what-record.com website. And if you want to be featured as well, then if you have epic games, then make sure you upload your replays there. And if you're watching this video as it's released on Monday, I'm going live all day on twitch.tv/QuickyBaby with brand new drops tokens. And these are going to be the penultimate ones. The last ones will be on Wednesday. So this is your last chance to get your 5 today, 5 tokens on Wednesday, to be able to see if you can get the Dickomax or the SU-85i for free. And as always, thank you so much for watching. You've been epic, and hopefully I'll see you soon.